Hey, what's up everybody? Yo, Cup of Joe here with another Splatoon 2 video, and today we're going to be talking about Splatoon patch 5.3, which just came out today. Personally, I'm a fan of all of the changes that they made. I think they all make sense. There were some things that I was hoping would get changed, but that didn't, so I am a little bit disappointed in some ways, but overall, the changes that they did make were things that I liked. Let's start with the things that I was hoping for, but that we didn't get. I thought that we were going to see an ink armor nerf because there were so many double ink armor compositions that were winning tournaments in all regions. But I guess Nintendo doesn't mind all of the ink armor weapons running around because they decided not to do anything to ink armor at all, so all of those ink armor weapons that were popular before are probably still going to be very popular now. I know there are a lot of competitive Splatoon 2 players who are pretty disappointed by the lack of an ink armor nerf, but there are currently already a lot of ways to play around ink armor, and someone on Twitter just made a little Twitter thread that talks about pretty much a lot of all the best ways to counter ink armor, so I'm going to put a link to that one in my video description. So if you're struggling to deal with ink armor, then I recommend that you check that out and get some ideas. The next thing I was expecting was a Bamboozler nerf, which we did get, but I was really hoping that it would be some kind of nerf that makes Bamboozler not as good with main power-up or something. Basically, I was hoping for an excuse to stop having to play Bamboozler with main power-up. I mean, I don't have to play Bamboo with main power-up, but right now when I play the Bamboo Mark III, I feel like I have to play with main power-up because it makes the Bamboozler so good, but I think it would be really fun to play with a special power-up version of Bamboo to get the really big bubbles. But, as you will see, there is no main power-up nerf coming to any of the weapons in Splatoon, and this is probably something that a lot of people were disappointed to see. Main power-up increasing the damage of some weapons kind of feels a bit uninteractive, especially when it's something like a Bamboozler or a Splattershot Pro that kills you from really far away so quickly that it doesn't even feel like you had a chance to react. But if you want to be honest, I guess I gotta say these 99.9 damage strategies are not unbeatable. You actually can react, it's just very hard to do so, but I think it is possible to beat these strategies, which is why Nintendo did not feel that they had to take it out of the game. The last thing I was hoping would get changed, but that didn't, is the Gutuber. And I know that I'm probably the only person in the Splatoon community right now talking about the Gutuber, but I really think that weapon has some potential as a great skirmish weapon. I have talked before about my belief that Gutuber has some potential, but right now it's just a little bit too weak to compared to other options. I just wish that Gutuber had a little bit more range so that it could have something over something like the H3. But anyway, we didn't see any kind of buff to Gutuber, so Gutuber is probably just never ever going to see play at the top level. It's very unfortunate. I believed in the weapon, but I don't know. I don't know if it's going to happen. It might just be too hard. And now, finally, let's talk about the changes that actually did happen. Okay, so first of all, there were two weapons that got buffed, the Splattershot and the 52 gal. Look at that, +1, beautiful. Something that you might not know about Splatoon is that on a lot of shooter weapons, the longer you hold down the trigger, the less and less accurate your weapon becomes. This is called Shot Bloom, and the buff to 52 gal and Splattershot makes it so that the weapon recovers from Shot Bloom a lot more quickly. This is going to allow both of those weapons to use a splat dashing technique to reset their weapon bloom. Splat dashing, if you don't know, means shooting your weapon and then swimming. That's all it is. Shoot and dash, or splat and dash. So if you're doing that technique, then you'll be able to reset your weapon bloom on both of these newly buffed weapons. I think that the buff is going to be much more significant on the 52 gal because that weapon has more range. So being able to rely more on your RNG being good is going to allow 52 gal to use its max range more effectively. The next couple of changes are ink efficiency nerfs to two very big mid-range threats. They are the Bamboozler and Dooley Squelchers. Bamboozler now spends 20% more ink per shot of the main weapon. You used to be able to fire 14, full charge shots with the Bamboozler, and now you can only fire 11. This is going to make it harder for players to just pick up bamboo and spam that right trigger until everything in front of them has died. Now you're going to have to be a little bit more careful with the shots that you take, and you're going to have to manage your ink tank a little bit better. I think that this is a great nerf. It makes it harder for people to just use the weapon when they're not actually very good with it, but if you do know what you're doing with the Bamboozler, then you can actually still use the weapon just fine, and this nerf won't really be the end of the world. It's not going to stop any Bamboozler mains from maining the Bamboozler. It's just going to make it harder for people to maybe pick up the Bamboozler for the first time. It might be a little bit more punishing. The Dooley Squelchers got a very similar nerf. They used to use 5% of their ink tank each time they use their dodge roll, but now they're going to be using 8% of their ink tank with each dodge roll. This is probably my favorite change of the patch because it addresses two things at once. First of all, it makes the Dooley Squelchers more difficult to use because ink management is going to be a bigger deal. And also, it stops Dooley Squelchers from doing this really annoying tactic that has been going around lately where the Dooley Squelchers are used as a frontline skirmisher and they just roll around forever and they never run out of ink because their rolls are so inexpensive and they just get to survive forever on the front line. That is no longer a problem, and I'm really glad for this change. I'm happy to stop seeing Dooley Squelchers flipping around all over my screen. Oh, and I just remembered, this also means that the custom Dooley Squelcher variant, after throwing a Splat Bomb, cannot roll around as much, which is actually a pretty big deal, but the best CDS players will find a way to work with it. And finally, I want to talk about the nerf to Umbrella. Umbrella is a shotgun-style weapon that fires 5 little pellets every time you pull the trigger, and each of those pellets used to deal 18 damage, now they only deal 16.2. With this change, a Umbrella firing 2 bursts at somebody needs to land 7 out of 10 pellets to get a splat, when they used to only need to land 6 out of 10. This is kind of like the effect of the ink efficiency nerf on bamboo. It is mostly hurting players who aren't already good with the weapon, but if you are good with the weapon, then this doesn't actually matter, because if you were able to land 6 pellets on somebody before, you're probably going to be able to land 7 pellets on them now. Still though, this does make Brella a little bit weaker, so maybe this will encourage players to learn the matchup against Brella a little bit better and see if maybe now with this little tiny little bit of extra wiggle room they have, being able to survive an extra pellet, maybe now some people who used to be losing really hard to Brella, maybe they're going to be able to find a way to use this tiny little extra bit of wiggle room to their advantage. I really like the way that they went about nerfing all of the weapons that they nerfed. It doesn't feel like any of those nerfed weapons isn't able to do what it could do in the past. It just feels like now it is harder. It requires a little bit more skill. If you want to be good with those weapons, you're going to have to be a little bit more dedicated to them, and I think that's perfectly fine. I like that kind of change. I'm also very happy that they chose to buff the Splatter Shot and the 52 Gal. Those weapons were struggling to survive in this meta where there are weapons like Splattershot Pro and Bamboozler that kill really fast and severely outrange the Splattershot and 52 Gal. I think that those weapons were close to being pretty good in competitive, and I think this little buff is just going to make life a little bit better for them. I'm expecting to see a lot more of the Kensa 52 Gal in the future, probably a lot less of the custom Dooley Squelchers. I expect to see pretty much the same amount of Bamboozlers. I don't think that the change is really going to discourage that many people, and I think that the Brella players really aren't going to be affected by this much either. In fact, I think we might start to see more Brella players because this nerf is just drawing attention to the fact that this weapon is strong. Anyway, I'll be leaving a link to the patch notes in the video description so you can read them all for yourself. There were a couple of small things that I did not mention. I just chose to focus on the things that I thought would have the biggest impact here. But I did mention every single weapon that did get a change. There were just a few extra small changes that I did not bring up. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed what you saw here today so that you can see some more. Feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions or want to share your opinion on anything. Thank you for watching.